There is belief, and then there is skepticism. Between the two lies a vast territory of questions and the unknown. What if reality is far more complex than we have been willing to perceive? What if the stories we dismissed as myth and legend hold the keys to understanding consciousness? From ghostly encounters to inexplicable lights in the sky, humanity has always sensed there was something more out there. Some call it paranormal, and others call it the divine. Some look to the stars for answers, while others search within. Philosophy asks, why? Theology asks, who? Science asks, how? And we ask ourselves, what if? We stand at the meeting point, a place where the veil between realities is thinner than you might think. This is the crossroads of the veil.
I would challenge anyone who is not even willing to consider the possibility of a non-human intelligence to consider the alternative for a second. For over 75 years, our own government or privatized contractors and companies have been authorized to and have carried out all the cattle and animal mutilations. They are responsible for the negative and sometimes permanent adverse health effects experienced by those who have come into contact with them during these events. And then you have all the alleged human abductions and experimentation. So I ask you this, which scenario is more terrifying to you? The non-human intelligence scenario, which makes us victims of circumstances beyond our control, or the far more sinister one, that it has been our own government at work here, the very people who are supposed to be protecting us and keeping us safe. And regardless of which one you believe, why have we not demanded answers on these issues? Explanations for the shapes and lights in our skies have ranged from weather balloons and Chinese lanterns to ball lightning, swamp gas, satellites, aircraft, and even mass hysteria. These stories have been fabricated to account for what we observe. The official inquiries started with Project Sign, 1947 to 1949. This was the first official USAF investigation into UFOs. It began with an open-minded and cautious scientific approach to try and determine the nature of the phenomena. Eventually, truths were uncovered about the phenomenon, and it was concluded that humanity was not yet ready to face them. Realizing changes were imperative, they introduced Project Grudge, 1949 to 1952, which shifted the focus from investigation to debunking, dismissing witness accounts based on alleged mental health conditions. Project Grudge's slow progress and unsatisfactory outcomes led to the CIA's involvement. They sponsored the Robertson Panel, 1953, a scientific body that officially established ridicule as a national security priority. This panel advocated for a nationwide debunking initiative through mass media, potentially laying the groundwork for Operation Mockingbird, to re-educate the public and diminish the UFO phenomenon's appeal. It formalized Project Grudge's unofficial methods into an advanced information control strategy. Moving forward, the CIA established the foundational framework and guidelines for addressing the phenomena. Initiated by the U.S. Air Force, Project Blue Book, 1952 to 1969, was officially sanctioned by the Robertson Panel, aligning with new CIA regulations. Captain Edward J. Ruppel and Dr. J. Allen Hynek initially followed orders, but eventually began to question the official policy after investigating numerous credible sightings. Due to concerns within the U.S. Air Force regarding the effectiveness of Project Blue Book, the Condon Committee, 1966 to 1968, was established. Physicist Dr. Edward U. Condon led this committee, drawing information from the National Photographic Interpretation Center, NPIC, a unit operating under the CIA. The findings of the Condon Committee ultimately resulted in the permanent termination of Project Blue Book. The phenomenon, comfortably cloaked in folklore, has been dismissed as a harmless cultural quirk, a piece of modern mythology to be enjoyed, but never truly believed. But something has changed. The paradigm is not just shifting under our feet. The very ground is threatening to give way. What started as hushed whispers is now being openly discussed in the highest levels of government. The mystery isn't shrinking, it's growing, stretching from the Pentagon's quiet hallways all the way to Congress. The people coming forward are telling a story that isn't just about aliens, but about power, and the groundbreaking tech that seems to break the rules of physics, and a deep secret some are rumored to be willing to kill to keep. Last week, veteran investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, someone with sources deep within the intelligence community, dropped a bombshell. A revelation that, if proven true, would not only shift the UAP conversation, it would shatter it completely. But what's even more startling is that part of the evidence may have been hiding in plain sight, broadcast on national television, and then almost inexplicably forgotten. We're talking about a 60 Minutes interview. Not with some fringe theorists, not with another anonymous whistleblower, but with two of the highest-ranking generals in charge of defending North American airspace, General Glenn Van Herk and his successor, General Gregory Guillot, the commanders of NORAD and US Northcom. What they said and what they admitted to should have sent shockwaves through the media and the American people. But it didn't. This is not primarily a story about what might be visiting us from the stars, but a story about what is already here. Imagine a hidden Cold War fought with unimaginable weapons, a constitutional crisis that threatens the very idea of oversight, and a technological enigma that forces us to question the nature of reality itself. We are not merely observing the sky above. We are unveiling the concealed layers beneath. This is the Immaculate Deception. Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. This is the crown jewel of American air power, home to the F-22 Raptor, the most advanced stealth fighter in the world. This technological fortress is protected by sophisticated, multi-layered surveillance systems capable of tracking nearly anything from space. It is, by any definition, one of the most secure pieces of real estate on planet Earth, which is why what happened in December of 2023 should be deeply terrifying. For 17 consecutive nights, the fortress was breached, not by a missile, not by a rival jet, but by a silent, coordinated swarm of something. Eyewitnesses on the ground saw them first. Reddish, orange, flashing lights, moving with unnatural precision. One witness, Jonathan Butner, watched in disbelief as the numbers grew from a handful to a swarm of more than 40, gliding out of the darkness over Virginia Beach and converging directly on the base. He pulled out his phone, capturing the only public images of the siege. Inside the base, the mood was not one of curiosity. It was one of controlled panic. Retired four-star General Mark Kelly, a man who has commanded the nation's most advanced air forces, saw them with his own eyes. He described a chilling variety. Small, commercial-sized quadcopters, yes, but also objects the size of a small car, operating at different altitudes. Some loud, some utterly silent. Unidentified craft of varying sizes and capabilities, operating with absolute impunity over a base that houses America's premier air superiority fighter. The response from the Air Force was not to engage. It was to evacuate. They moved the F-22s, these billion-dollar symbols of dominance, to a nearby base for their own protection. Because, as one official admitted, they feared the objects could simply drop ordnance on the jets or crash into them, disabling a critical part of the nation's defense without firing a single shot. This wasn't an isolated incident. Similar swarms have been documented over other strategic bases, facilities in Europe, sites known to house American nuclear weapons. In the last year, over 350 similar detections at 100 different military installations. This is not the work of hobbyists. This is a coordinated, sustained, and deliberate campaign. And the most chilling part, the official admission. In an unprecedented interview on 60 Minutes, the two highest-ranking generals responsible for defending North American airspace, General Glenn Van Herk and his successor, General Gregory Guillot, made a confession that should have frozen the blood of every citizen. They stated unequivocally that against these objects, they are powerless. Their multi-billion-dollar Cold War-era radar systems, designed to spot incoming bombers and missiles, are blind to them. They cannot even track them back to their point of origin. They cannot follow them to their destination. They cannot explain their propulsion. No jets, no propellers, No heat signatures. General Guillot, the current commander of NORAD, did not mince words. He said the situation is alarming and that at NORTHCOM their hair is on fire. The decision for two four-star generals to appear on a major news program and publicly declare such a fundamental capability gap is not a casual press briefing. It is a calculated, strategic act. It signals a profound breakdown of trust and communication within the highest levels of the U.S. government. Generals of this rank do not confess to such critical vulnerabilities unless they feel their internal warnings have been ignored. Their candor stands in stark, chilling contrast to the placid, dismissive statements from the White House, which has attempted to frame these events as the work of hobbyists and authorized research drones. This public contradiction is a flare in the dark, signaling that the generals are attempting to apply external pressure on a political establishment they believe is dangerously downplaying a real and present threat. It is a public alarm, sounded only when the internal alarms have been silenced. The nature of the incursions themselves sustained, coordinated, and targeting our most advanced fighter and nuclear assets points to something far more sinister than simple reconnaissance. This is a deliberate campaign of technological demonstration and psychological intimidation. The goal is not merely to gather data, but to send an unmistakable message. We can operate in your most secure airspace at will, and you are powerless to stop us. It is an act of asymmetric warfare designed to create strategic paralysis and sow doubt within the U.S. military command. A fortress under siege by a silent, invisible enemy. The world's most advanced military, admitting it is outmatched, outmaneuvered, and technologically blind. And a political apparatus desperate to hide this terrifying truth behind a wall of absurd lies and ridicule. The veil has been pierced. But the question is not what is piercing it. The question is who. In the world of secrets, there are two kinds of silence: the silence of ignorance and the silence of complicity. For decades, the UAP topic was smothered by both. But in June of 2023, one man decided to break the silence with a formal, calculated, and legally devastating act. His name is David Grudge, and he is the inciting incident in this entire drama. Grudge is not your typical ufologist. He is the antithesis of the stereotype. A decorated combat veteran of Afghanistan, a former high-level intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, the agency that manages America's spy satellites. This is a man who has held the highest clearances, a man who was entrusted with the nation's most sensitive secrets. He was the NRO's representative to the Pentagon's official UAP task force. He was, in short, an ultimate insider. He didn't leak grainy photos to the press. He didn't go on late-night radio with a wild story. He did something far more dangerous and far more brilliant. He filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. He made his claims under oath, subject to the penalties of perjury, within the legally protected channels designed for precisely this purpose. And his claims were seismic. Grudge alleged that he was tasked by Congress to identify all secret programs related to UAP, and that in the course of his official duties, he was denied access. But more than that, he was told by dozens of high-ranking, current and former intelligence officials about a multi-decade, covert, and entirely illegal program to retrieve and reverse engineer craft of non-human origin. Let's be clear about what he said, under oath. He spoke of a program that has recovered multiple craft, some intact, some partial. He spoke of the recovery of non-human biologics, the pilots. He alleged that this program is funded illegally through the misappropriation of taxpayer money and that it is being unlawfully withheld from congressional oversight, a direct violation of the U.S. Constitution. And then came the darkest allegation of all. Grudge testified that he reported to the Inspector General that people have been harmed and even killed as part of the conspiracy to keep this secret. The Inspector General, a position not known for hyperbole, reviewed Grudge's claims and the evidence he provided. Their conclusion? Credible and urgent. With this single act, David Grudge transformed the entire landscape. His strategy was to weaponize the law itself. For 75 years, the demand to prove it with physical evidence of aliens has been an insurmountable roadblock. Grudge understood this. His complaint was not primarily about the phenomenon, but about the process. His core allegations are of federal crimes: misappropriation of funds, lying to Congress, and violating the constitutional requirement for oversight. This gave Congress a legal predicate for investigation that had nothing to do with aliens. The question for lawmakers was no longer, show us the alien. It was, show us the money, show us the accounting ledgers for these unacknowledged programs you are illegally hiding from us. It was a brilliant gambit to bypass the scientific roadblock and force the system to confront the apparatus of secrecy itself. Grudge's testimony also provides the foundational source code for the entire narrative we are exploring tonight. The existence of impossible technology requires a source. Grudge provides it: recovered non-human craft. This is the original sin from which all subsequent events in our story, the human-made reproductions, the ferocious secrecy, the hidden Cold War, logically flow. His testimony is the linchpin that holds the entire fact-driven narrative together. He knew the risks. He spoke of the reprisals he faced for coming forward, but he stepped out of the shadows anyway. He laid down a formal challenge, not just to the Pentagon, but to the entire structure of the national security state. He placed a ticking bomb on the desk of the United States Congress, and the world is now waiting to see if they have the courage to defuse it, or if the explosion will shatter our most basic assumptions about our government, our technology, and our place in the universe. A whistleblower's testimony, no matter how credible, is only a spark. To start a fire, it needs dry tinder and a steady wind. In the wake of David Grudge's bombshell allegations, that wind came from a place few expected: the senior leadership of the United States Senate. The system, for the first time, began to formally push back against the secret. Congress crossed a threshold, moving from quiet inquiry to open legislative warfare. In a stunning display of bipartisanship, a political phenomenon almost as rare as a UAP sighting itself, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat, stood shoulder to shoulder with Republican Senator Mike Rounds. Together, they introduced the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. This wasn't some token resolution. It was a 64-page, iron-toothed piece of legislation designed to do one thing: rip the doors off the black-walled labyrinth of UAP secrecy. The act was explicitly modeled on the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, a successful legal framework for prying loose the government's most stubborn secrets. It called for the creation of an independent, presidentially appointed citizen review board. Think of it as a Supreme Court for secrets. This board would have the power, the authority, and the legal mandate to review every single government record related to UAP with a presumption of immediate disclosure. The burden of proof would shift. Instead of citizens having to prove a document should be public, the intelligence agencies would have to prove, under a very strict set of criteria, why it must remain secret. The specific language used in the initial draft of the act is a direct reflection and validation of the whistleblower testimony that inspired it. It wasn't a generic transparency bill. It was a targeted legal instrument. The draft explicitly defined UAP in terms of technologies of unknown origin and non-human intelligence. This language is the legislative echo of David Grudge's complaint: powerful circumstantial evidence that the Senate leadership found his testimony credible enough to draft highly specific and powerful legislation to address it directly. But the authors of the bill knew that documents were only part of the puzzle. Grudge and other whistleblowers had alleged that the real secrets, the physical evidence, weren't in government vaults. They were in the hands of private defense contractors. This is why Congress suspected the secret had been privatized. If the materials were held in government facilities, existing congressional subpoena power would, in theory, be sufficient. The need for a power as extraordinary as eminent domain implies that the materials are held by private, non-governmental entities outside the normal reach of congressional oversight. So Schumer and Rounds included a provision of breathtaking power, a clause of eminent domain. This clause would have given the United States government the authority to walk into any private aerospace company, any Lockheed, any Northrop Grumman, any Raytheon, and seize any recovered non-human craft, any reverse-engineered technology, any material of unknown origin that it held. It was a declaration that this technology, regardless of who possessed it, belonged to the American people. This was the legislative equivalent of a declaration of war against the secret keepers. For a moment, it seemed like the truth was finally within reach. The Senate passed the amendment with overwhelming support. The spark had caught. The fire was beginning to spread. The system, it seemed, was finally being forced to account for its decades of silence. The threshold had been crossed. The question now was, what is waiting on the other side? In any great conflict, the first charge is often the most optimistic. But power, especially entrenched clandestine power, does not yield easily. It has its own immune system, its own antibodies that swarm to attack any foreign agent of transparency. The UAP Disclosure Act was that foreign agent. And the system's response was swift, silent, and brutally effective. The empire has struck back. The bill, passed with such fanfare in the Senate, had to be reconciled with the version in the House of Representatives. And it was here in the closed-door conference committees, away from the C-SPAN cameras and the public eye, that the real power brokers went to work. Key members of the House and Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committees, the very committees that have been accused of being captured by the military-industrial complex they are meant to oversee, began to systematically gut the legislation. One by one, its teeth were pulled. But they saved their most vicious work for its heart, the eminent domain clause. That provision, the one that would have allowed the government to seize physical craft and materials from private contractors, was targeted with surgical precision, and it was eliminated. The failure of this specific clause was more revealing than its success could ever have been. It acted as a diagnostic tool, mapping the contours of the secret. The opposition could have killed the entire bill, but they didn't. They allowed the parts about creating a records collection to pass, creating an illusion of transparency. They focused their political capital with surgical precision on one single item. This reveals their priorities. They are not primarily afraid of documents being released or testimony being heard. They are terrified of losing control of the physical hardware. The secret, therefore, is not an abstract piece of knowledge. It is a tangible, physical asset held by private corporations, and those corporations wield enough political power to defeat the Senate Majority Leader on a key provision. The message could not have been clearer. The institutional opposition was not primarily afraid of releasing documents. They were not terrified of testimony. They were terrified of losing the hardware. The secret, it seems, has been privatized. The technology of the gods is a corporate asset. With the legislative threat neutralized, the second phase of the counterattack began. A war for the narrative, an information war. The Pentagon's official UAP Investigation Office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, released a series of historical reports. These reports, heavily criticized by former intelligence officials like Christopher Mellon as being riddled with errors and omissions, essentially attempted to gaslight the public. They claim that many of the foundational UFO stories of the Cold War were actually misidentifications of secret U.S. spy planes like the U-2. They even floated the absurd story that a fictional alien investigation program was used as a bizarre hazing ritual for new recruits. Then this official narrative was laundered through the prestige press. The Wall Street Journal, citing AARO officials, published articles echoing this line, effectively weaponizing skepticism. This is a classic limited hangout strategy. A limited hangout involves admitting a lesser, manageable truth to conceal a greater, more damaging one. The AARO WSJ narrative admits to decades of government secrecy and deception regarding UFOs. This is the hangout. It seems like a shocking confession. However, it uses this admission to conceal the real reason for the secrecy. It claims the secret was just conventional spy planes. This masterfully deflects from the far more damaging truth alleged by Grudge, that the secret is recovered non-human technology. By providing a plausible, officially sanctioned terrestrial explanation for the secrecy, they inoculate themselves against the more extraordinary claims. It poisons the well. It gives skeptics a plausible, officially sanctioned narrative to cling to, reinforcing the institutional taboo against taking the subject seriously. The first great charge for transparency had been repelled. The bill was gutted, the narrative was muddied, and the secret keepers retreated back into the shadows, leaving the public with a renewed sense of confusion and doubt. The point was clear. The truth is not just being hidden, it is being actively and skillfully fought against. For decades, the UAP question was framed as a simple binary. Is it ours or is it theirs? Terrestrial or extraterrestrial? The midpoint of our story shatters that mirror, and the answer that looks back is more complex and disturbing than either possibility. The ghost in the machine, it turns out, may have been built in a factory. Let us return to the bedrock case of the modern era, the 2004 USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group encounter. The story is now legendary. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Alex Dietrich, two of the Navy's finest Top Gun pilots, in their F/A-18F Super Hornets, visually engage a 40-foot, white, wingless, seamless object shaped like a tic-tac. The object displays an impossible intelligence, mirroring their movements, before accelerating to hypersonic speeds and disappearing. Seconds later, it is detected 60 miles away at their rendezvous point, a feat of speed and acceleration that defies known physics and would crush any human pilot. To understand why this case is so foundational, we must look at the consistent, repeatable characteristics of the objects observed by our military. The data reveals a distinct typology, a pattern that refutes the notion of random, anecdotal sightings. We see a recurring morphology, perfect geometric shapes like spheres, cubes, and triangles, and elongated, seamless cylinders like the tic-tac, all lacking wings, control surfaces, or visible propulsion. We see a consistent set of kinematics, the so-called 5 observables: instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities without sonic booms or heat signatures, low observability or stealth, transmedium travel between air and sea, and positive lift or anti-gravity. These are not misidentifications of weather phenomena. They are the performance characteristics of a machine. And a machine with a consistent performance envelope can be studied, understood, and, theoretically, replicated. The default assumption has always been that this object, with its otherworldly performance, must be exactly that, otherworldly. But investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, a figure whose meticulous research and high-level sources have made him one of the most credible voices on this topic, has put forward a claim so radical it reframes the entire phenomenon. He has stated publicly and unequivocally, "I now know categorically that the tic-tac is Lockheed Martin technology." Let that sink in. The most famous, most credible, most technologically inexplicable UAP encounter of the 21st century was not an encounter with non-human intelligence. It was, according to Coulthart's sources, a glimpse of a top-secret, human-made craft built by the largest defense contractor on Earth. A craft that is part of at least 2 distinct secret platforms that, until very recently, most of Congress was completely unaware of. We have been staring at the sky looking for aliens, when perhaps we should have been looking at the black budget contracts of our own military-industrial complex. This hypothesis, while seemingly less exotic, is in many ways more politically and philosophically explosive. The existence of aliens is an ontological shock. The existence of a hidden human group that has mastered propellantless, transmedium, hypersonic flight, that has effectively solved the energy crisis and mastered the physics of the gods, and has kept it secret for decades is a betrayal. It means a private corporation, in league with a clandestine government cabal, possesses a technology that could change the world, but has withheld it for power and profit. It means the Navy's own elite pilots were used as unwitting test subjects, their lives put at risk by a program from which their own chain of command was excluded. This reveals a dangerous level of fragmentation within the U.S. defense establishment, where one secret part of the military uses another as a guinea pig. Add to that the claims of the former acting director of the Pentagon's UAP office, AARO, Timothy Phillips, specifically named the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, as the entity whose DARPA scientists dressed in black did land and retrieve the data. This is significant because DARPA's mission is to investigate breakthrough technologies. Their alleged involvement implies the event was taken with the utmost seriousness and could point to either the analysis of an unknown technology or the recovery of a secret U.S. asset. Coulthart's claim does not contradict David Grush's testimony. It perfectly complements and validates it. Grudge alleges a legacy program to reverse engineer non-human craft. The logical goal of reverse engineering is to reproduce the technology. The tic-tac, displaying NHI-level performance, is therefore the successful product of the very program Grudge described. It is an alien reproduction vehicle, or ARV. This insight connects the historical legacy program to the most famous modern UAP sighting, creating a single, coherent timeline. But how is such a thing possible? Where would such a leap in physics come from? The answer may lie not just in the alien technology, but also in the strange and controversial work of a forgotten American inventor named Thomas Townsend Brown. In the 1920s, while experimenting with high-voltage vacuum tubes, Brown observed a strange force. He found that an asymmetrical capacitor, essentially a thin wire held over a larger metal plate, when charged with tens of thousands of volts, would lurch forward. He believed he had discovered a link between electricity and gravity, a principle he called electrogravitics. The mainstream scientific community, then and now, has a prosaic explanation: ion wind. The high voltage ionizes the air, and this cloud of charged particles creates a stream of air that provides thrust. But Brown was adamant his effect persisted in a vacuum. His work attracted serious, if fleeting, interest from the U.S. military during the Cold War. But the official story is that the interest died out. Or did it? What if Brown was partially right? What if, in the deepest, blackest of programs, they took his foundational human research and supercharged it with the quantum leap in understanding provided by the recovered non-human technology? The tic-tac, then, is not a pure alien craft. It is a hybrid. It is the culmination of a century of secret human research, bootstrapped by a physics that is not of this earth. It is the ghost of Thomas Townsend Brown, resurrected from the boneyard of fringe science and forged into a weapon in the bowels of the skunk works, using a blueprint that came from the stars. The mirror is shattered. The enemy is not out there. It may be us, a hidden version of us, with a technology we can barely imagine. In the world of shadows, anonymity is power. A vague allegation of secret programs can be dismissed. It's a ghost story, a conspiracy theory. But give the ghost a name, and it begins to solidify. It becomes a target. Just as the forces of secrecy seem to have won, gutting the legislation and controlling the media narrative, a new leak emerged from the depths of the intelligence community. A reversal. A document reportedly provided to Congress by a UAP whistleblower as part of a formal disclosure was leaked. It was the result of a multi-year internal investigation, and it named the program. The name is Immaculate Constellation. According to the document, Immaculate Constellation is a parent of an unacknowledged Special Access Program, or USAP. It is the central hub, the nexus, for consolidating all data on UAP and what the document chillingly refers to as alien reproduction vehicles, ARVs. The very terminology implies a program that deals with both captured non-human craft and the human-made copies, directly corroborating the midpoint revelation. The program's mission is to collect imagery intelligence. It uses a vast, undeclared network of military and intelligence assets, in orbit, in the atmosphere, and under the sea, to track not only the UAP themselves, but also the efforts of foreign nations to study and replicate them. This alleged mission is a critical piece of the puzzle. It is an official acknowledgement from within the secret program itself that the U.S. intelligence community is aware that other nations are also in the reverse engineering game. It provides the direct, documented predicate for the geopolitical crisis to come. The document provides startlingly specific examples of the kind of high-fidelity imagery locked away in the program's databases. It describes a cuboid formation of approximately 12 metallic orbs flying in a perfect, three-dimensional geometric pattern over the ocean. It describes a massive, silent, equilateral triangle UAP hovering over naval vessels before vanishing in an instant. These are not vague lights in the sky. These are specific morphologies, specific behaviors, logged and cataloged in a program whose very name evokes a sense of divine, celestial perfection. The act of naming this program is a profound escalation. It was a direct counterstrike in the information war. a signal from the whistleblowers inside the system that they would not be silenced after their legislative defeat. It transforms the entire fight. It gives members of Congress, journalists, and investigators a specific term to hunt for. They can now ask in open hearings and in classified briefings, "Tell us about Immaculate Constellation." They can file Freedom of Information Act requests for any document bearing that name. It makes blanket denials and bureaucratic runaround infinitely more difficult. A vague denial is easy. Denying a named, detailed program that has been described under oath to Congress is a far more perilous act. Just when the official story seemed to be taking hold, a crack appeared in the wall of secrecy, and through it, a name was whispered. A name for the shadow. And with that name, the hunt began anew. Secrecy is a double-edged sword. For decades, the United States allegedly held the secret of non-human technology, believing it was a trump card, a hidden advantage over any potential rival. But the ultimate crisis, the disaster at the heart of the story, is the horrifying possibility that the very secrecy designed to protect that advantage bred a fatal complacency. The dragon that was sleeping on its hoard of technological gold awoke to find its most precious jewels had been stolen. And now that stolen technology is being aimed back at its original owner. This is the thesis put forward by Ross Coulthart's sources, and it represents a catastrophic intelligence failure on a scale that would dwarf 9/11's. The United States, they claim, has been caught asleep at the wheel. While it was hiding its secret breakthroughs, other nations were not idle. And one nation in particular, China, has not only caught up, but may have surpassed them. China's massive investment in fundamental physics research is a matter of public record. While not direct proof of a secret weapons program, it serves as powerful circumstantial evidence of a national intent to master the very fields of science that could lead to such a breakthrough. Consider the Centrifugal Hypergravity and Interdisciplinary Experiment Facility, or CHIEF, in Hangzhou. This massive complex, built at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, is the world's most advanced hypergravity research center, capable of generating forces up to 1,900 times that of Earth's gravity, significantly surpassing the capabilities of its U.S. counterpart. Electrogravitics and field propulsion are, at their core, about the relationship between electromagnetism, mass, and gravity. A hypergravity centrifuge is the exact type of foundational research tool a nation would build if it were serious about mastering the physics of gravity for advanced applications, including propulsion and materials science for extreme performance craft. What has been happening in China's black programs is the stuff of nightmares for Western military planners. According to these high-level sources, the drone incursions over Langley, over America's nuclear bases, were not just reconnaissance. They were a message, a demonstration, a big FU from China to the United States, as one source put it. They were a display of advanced Chinese electrogravitic technology, a deliberate, calculated act to show the U.S. that they could operate with absolute impunity over its most sensitive sovereign territory, that they had mastered the secret as well. This is the disaster, the moment of crisis. It reframes everything. The secrecy is no longer about preventing public panic over aliens. It's not even about protecting a technological advantage. It is now about concealing a profound strategic humiliation. It is about hiding the fact that America may have already lost the next war before it has even begun. This explains the frantic, contradictory denials from the White House. It explains the hair-on-fire panic at NORAD. It is far, far easier to manage public speculation about UFOs, which can be marginalized and ridiculed, than it is to admit to the American people that a rival power possesses a silent, stealthy, physics-defying technology that can disable your entire military infrastructure without warning. Imagine a conflict in the Taiwan Strait where, in the opening minutes, silent, unseen drones take out every aircraft carrier, every fighter jet on the runway, every command and control satellite in orbit. The current UAP disclosure movement is likely not being driven by a desire to reveal aliens, but by an internal panic within a faction of the U.S. defense and intelligence community over this strategic failure. This faction, represented by figures like Grudge and Coulthart's sources, believes that the excessive, illegal secrecy is the cause of this failure, as it stifled innovation and prevented a coordinated national response. The political leadership and the secret keepers, however, want to hide this failure to avoid accountability. Therefore, the pro-transparency faction is using the UAP issue as a lever to force the crisis into the open, hoping to sound the alarm and trigger a Manhattan Project-style response to catch up to China. The crisis is here. It is now. The UAP phenomenon has crashed headlong into geopolitics, and the implications are terrifying. The decades of secrecy have created the very strategic vulnerability they were meant to prevent. The ghost in the machine is no longer just a domestic secret. It has been weaponized by a rival. And the slow, silent siege of America's military bases may only be the opening move in a conflict that will be fought in the shadows, with a physics we are only just beginning to acknowledge exists. We have followed the threads through the labyrinth: the geopolitical crisis, the governmental secrecy, the technological enigma. And here at the center, they do not resolve into a simple answer. They converge into a single, terrifying, and all-encompassing hypothesis. A moment of truth that reconciles the terrestrial with the exotic, the human with the non-human. This is the theory of the shadow war. Let's assemble the pieces into the layer cake of deception. It begins with layer 1, the original sin. As David Grudge alleges, the story starts with the recovery of genuine non-human intelligence technology and biologics decades ago. This is the source, the real exotic core of the mystery. An event that gave humanity a glimpse of a physics beyond its comprehension. From that source comes layer 2, the American replication. A deeply secret U.S. program, perhaps Immaculate Constellation, begins a reverse engineering effort of unimaginable scope. Over decades, they succeed. They master the physics. They build their own alien reproduction vehicles. They create the technology we see in the Lockheed Martin Tic Tac. This is the ghost in the machine. Then comes layer 3. The secret is stolen. The decades of American secrecy, intended to protect its advantage, instead created a vulnerability. Through espionage, cyber theft, or perhaps even independent discovery based on their own recovered artifact, America's primary rival, China, also acquires or develops this revolutionary technology. This leads to layer 4, the shadow war. The UAP phenomenon we are witnessing today is not primarily an engagement with aliens. It is the public face of a clandestine geopolitical conflict. The skies above our heads have become the battlefield for a new Cold War, fought not with nuclear missiles, but with alien physics. The Nimitz encounter in 2004 was the United States testing its ARV, using its own Navy as unwitting observers. The Langley incursions in 2023 were China demonstrating its ARV capability, sending a direct message of technological parity or even superiority to the United States. The legislative battle in Congress is a proxy war between a faction that wants to sound the alarm about this new Cold War and a faction that wants to conceal America's strategic failure. The aliens have become the perfect cover story, the ultimate misdirection for all sides. It allows the United States to hide its secret programs and its catastrophic intelligence failure. It allows China to probe American defenses under a cloak of inexplicable phenomena. The entire UAP topic has been weaponized as a grand deception to hide a terrestrial power struggle of unimaginable stakes. We are the bewildered natives, watching what we think are the gods battling in the sky, when in fact it is a fight between rival human factions who have stolen the fire of the gods. The physical evidence itself points to this conclusion. The analysis of alleged UAP materials by scientists like Dr. Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée reveals mundane terrestrial elements, magnesium, bismuth, arranged in highly anomalous engineered structures with unusual isotopic ratios. This is precisely what one would expect from a human reverse engineering program. Humans would not have access to exotic unobtainium from another star system. They would be forced to use terrestrial elements. The signature of the advanced technology is not what it's made of, but how it's made. The precise atomic-level engineering and isotopic manipulation. The materials science evidence points directly toward a terrestrial entity attempting to replicate a non-human manufacturing process, which is the very core of the shadow war hypothesis. So where does this leave us, standing before a mirror? A strange, distorted, epistemological mirror. Because the UAP phenomenon, in the end, reflects whatever we project onto it. It is so fragmented, so strange, and so shrouded in deliberate lies that it can support any interpretation. To the national security analyst, it is a terrestrial arms race, a failure of intelligence. To the constitutional lawyer, a crisis of government oversight, a shadow state run amok. To the physicist, a direct challenge to the standard model, and a glimpse of a new science. To the theologian, a spiritual battle between angels and demons, a sign of the end times. To the experiencer, a personal, consciousness-altering event that redefines their place in the universe. None of them are necessarily wrong. They are simply looking at one facet of a multidimensional crystal. The phenomenon's most profound and enduring characteristic may be its stubborn refusal to be contained by any single way of knowing. It forces the soldier to become a physicist, the physicist to become a philosopher, and the philosopher to confront the terrifying possibility that the human mind itself is an active participant in the reality it observes. The greatest impact of the UAP phenomenon may not be technological or political, but epistemological. It forces a fundamental crisis in how we know what we know. It shatters trust in our primary institutions, government, science, media, and forces the individual to become their own arbiter of a complex and deliberately obscured reality. The true disclosure is the revelation of the depth of the deception and the fragility of our consensus world. The questions that remain are the ones you must now ask yourselves. If someone possesses technology that could save our planet, what does it mean that they have chosen to hoard it? This implies a moral calculus so cold and a lust for power so absolute that it redefines our understanding of human evil. If our own government is lying, not just about lights in the sky, but about a catastrophic failure to protect us from a rival's technological leap, what does that say about their very nature? And the final darkest question, if there was an original non-human source for all of this, where is it now? Is it watching this human drama, this shadow war fought with its stolen toys, play out with amusement, with pity? Or is it an active, unseen player manipulating the human factions for its own purposes? A control system operating on a scale we cannot comprehend. The crossroads are before us. The path you choose to walk is your own. But do not believe for a second that the world is just as it seems.
As we step back from the crossroads, remember, the veil between the known and unknown is thinner than we think. But the story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. Because what we explore here is not just about the phenomena, but the journey that we are all on, searching for meaning and our purpose in life, seeking the knowledge and the wisdom to solve the deeper mysteries in our universe and to find and fulfill our destiny. Unexplained sightings, spirits, and science. They are all connected, and they have been interwoven into the grand tapestry of life. So remember, keep pulling at the threads, because this has been the crossroads of the veil.